Welcome to the Eventful Podcast, where real conversations meet big ideas.
This is where the real journey gets shared.
It's honest,
It's inspiring.
and it's always eventful. We're so excited to kick off our podcast. We've been talking about doing this for years.
Since we started our business, basically.
Since we started our business, and we are pumped about it. What people can expect from this season, I think, is learning about who we are, where we came from, how we started our business, and why we started our business. Because I think even some of our friends don't know the real story of how we got here. It's been a wild tale.
A wild tale. And we get asked that a lot, even in passing. We meet people out and about and they're just intrigued by our story, and we're just excited to share it with everybody.
Very excited. So I think what people can expect from this first season is, we've never done this before, and we are pumped to launch it. So we are interviewing and inviting on some exciting guests. We've pulled from our network of clients and professional contacts that we have.
People that we admire and also think others would like to hear from and learn from, and also would find them interesting.
Correct. And this entire first season is all women. So it's all female founders, leaders, executives, change makers in their industry. We have people from all different walks of life and career backgrounds, and it's going to be fun. We can't wait to get into it. I think we decided to start this podcast because, Meredith has always wanted to have a podcast. We're big podcast fans and listeners. But I think it actually really came from when we started posting on social media, and our social media manager let us know that the videos and reels and highlights of us talking to each other and talking about how we started our business and the positives and the hard stuff that comes along with that actually was what got the most engagement. And I think just personally, our friends and people who we know ask us these questions all the time.
Yeah. And it's interesting because friends and family members and people that I know very well, or maybe Jess knows really well, they still love to hear all the ins and outs. And to what Jess said about our social media, we started to go hard on our Instagram last year, right? And people loved the behind the scenes stuff as well as the stories the most, I think, even more than just seeing, the pretty event pictures. So we thought, why the hell not? We'd always wanted to do a podcast, but we didn't necessarily have a theme around it. And we kind of started to ideate it and figured, let's launch a podcast. There's a lot of really interesting people that we want to talk to, but let's also incorporate our own story that people can hear about and see how it intertwines also with other people's stories, how they started a business, or maybe they didn't start a business, but they're a leader in their space or something.
Personally, I have, let's say, assisted or personally advised several friends and family members now on starting their own business, which before we did this, I had no idea what I was doing, and I would have never thought that I would be able to do that. And so I think that we find so many founders and other female leaders inspiring, and I think it's just our chance to kind of converse with them. And we also realize that even from our story, not a lot of people know even really what we do or what our day-to-day is like, or what starting and running a business or having a business partner, all the things that come along with that. People don't really know what goes into that. And I think if you've ever wanted to start your own business or have ever just been curious about what this looks like, it's a chance for us to kind of share what our day-to-day and what our world looks like. And also with guests, I'm super interested to interview some of our amazing clients and some of like the female powerhouse badasses that we have in our network and that we're friends with. And so we're very excited.
Yeah. And I think everyone will enjoy the different types of speakers that we have. Not everyone is going to be, like I said, from the exact space that we work in. Not actually, we're the only events people. There's no one else so far that we've that we'll be interviewing that do events, but you can always learn from someone and people that we admire, and maybe we'll also learn from people during it.
Also, we're in the events business. Prospect Events is the company we own. And this is the Eventful Podcast by Prospect Events. But, because we do events actually, of course, is an industry in and of itself. However, we span across a lot of industries. And so we get to meet people and chat with people and get inspired by people who are so smart and so plugged in and so innovative and creative and just leaders and hustlers. And I think we get influenced by so many interesting people on a daily, weekly basis. And we learn so much from those people. So why would we keep that to ourselves?
So let's get into it.
Where and when did we meet and under what circumstances?
Oof. Let's go way back. Okay.
So I had been hired at a small tech startup for a digital marketing position, and I actually was not loving what I was doing. However, they needed assistance planning an event in Las Vegas, and I had never been to Las Vegas. I had never planned an event. I had no idea what I was doing, and I ended up going to that event and had so much fun planning it, and I got such great feedback from the executives that they asked me if I wanted to make event planning my full-time job. And I said, absolutely, yes, I want to do this because this is probably the first thing that I've ever found that I feel comfortable doing and excited about. And it involved travel. So obviously, 25 years old, I definitely wanted to do that. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And it was for the time. However, my boss, the CMO, said, we're going to hire somebody who can teach you a little bit more about what you need to know. He said, I'm going to set up a meeting with this person and we'll see if you guys click.
So this person happened to be me. I believe my name had been passed through the industry through my old boss because I that summer was on a sabbatical. And I said, sure, I'll take an interview with this company that I've never heard about. Why not? Right. So the CMO who we still talk to, hey, David, excited to talk to you tomorrow. Who would have thought 10 years later we're doing this? Anyways, he set up a meeting for us to meet for a coffee at Le Pain Quineden over in the Flatiron district of New York. So I walk upstairs. I'm there a little early. I never show up late, especially for an interview.
I was probably late.
No, I think you showed up on time. You showed up and you had a big smile on your face, and already I had a nice impression. This is a very friendly person, at least, And we just kind of hit it off. I remember we got our coffees. We just started talking about events. We even veered off into other things. We got along really well. And so I said, sure, it would be fun to work with this person.
We never talked about that. What I remember thinking is this girl lives in Brooklyn. She's very cool. She's very Brooklyn cool. So I was not Brooklyn cool, but I remember thinking just that she knew what she was doing and she knew what she was talking about. And she had a lot of experience in what I needed to learn. So from there, David was like, the next day I walked into work, I'll never forget. He was like, what'd you think? And I was like, I liked her. I mean, she's great. So they hired her. And I mean, long story short, we worked there together for I think over 4 years.
Well, you were there for about 4 years. I was a little bit north of 3 years.
Meredith was my boss for a long time, which I think actually like people who we used to work with obviously know, but a lot of people don't know, like our clients and things like that don't know. So I think, Meredith and I worked really well together running their global events program. So I think what clicked is because we do have a lot of differences.
Yeah.
I think the things that we have that are very much the same, which I realized early on, we have the same taste and taste level, which I think we pride ourselves on. Same work ethic. I think that was the main thing. I mean, look, because you work with so many people, whether they're your boss or not, and you stay connected to some of them, you don't stay connected to some of them. And obviously, when you're working together at a small startup, especially in those days, a well-funded startup, and you're traveling the world together and doing all this stuff, stuff happens, right? Like we were young and, you get like so wrapped up in the drama of the company and like what the trajectory is and who said what. And it's funny because we don't work internally anymore, so we don't really have that dynamic, but it was what it was. I mean, we were young and working together, but it was typical corporate fodder, I think. However, getting back into what I realized early on that we had in common was our taste, definitely our work ethic, like a hustle, work ourselves to the bone, however healthy that is, but it's worked for our business. And I think we both like to travel.
We were both kind of gravitated towards each other being interesting to each other. And having a worldly background, I think, helped us be very creative with our events. And we also both are people, I think, that liked to try new things and would get excited about it. So, I mean, it was fairly, even though I was your boss, it was fairly early on in my career. I was probably 5 or 6 years into doing events. So that's not, too advanced, not that much more than you. And I think we both learned a lot together too.
But when you're 25 and like somebody's 29 or 30, they're like so much older and wiser than you. That's how you feel. So that's how I felt because like you were my superior, right? But I think what is interesting though are we talked about some things that we do have in common, which of course as we've started and grown our business, which we'll get into, we realized, we had more in common and we realized we had more differences because that's what it takes to do this. Um some of our One other thing that we have in common is I think we come from the same socioeconomic background, which I think that definitely inspired us to hustle. So obviously when you are young and you're working together in a corporate environment, there's like ups and downs and drama and you get pulled into the social drama of everything. Um but I think the main thing that I realized is that we produced, I think, the same level of work together. And actually, David Spitz, our boss, was the person who first pointed that out to me. And he said, one day you guys are going to start your own company. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. But here we are 6 years later.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because even within the industry that we were working in, we were kind of always thought of as the Meredith and Jessica show. Seriously, though, people would always say in the industry, we produced a lot of amazing events for our company. But we were always kind of like a duo. No one kind of thought of us individually. We'd be at industry conferences and they're like, oh, Meredith and Jessica did this, Meredith and Jessica did that. So I think that just to go to the point of what you're saying with our old boss, David, he just saw that we worked really well together and produced a lot of really amazing events together. So, of course, we're individual people and we have our strengths and weaknesses that make us great business partners because you don't want to have the same skill set as your business partner. That's my opinion, because if you're doing the exact same thing, there's a lot of gaps that I think would be empty. But we did have the same work ethic, the same taste level, and we were both very eager to learn and try new things.
I think those are the main things that have created a solid foundation for what we're doing now is that I don't think either of us have ever had anything handed to us. We both have worked pretty much our whole, I mean, I worked all the way through high school, all the way through college. Like, I think you did as well. Like we've always hustled. And I think not that if you do come from a higher income background or something like that, that means you're not a hustler, but I think that we always had to work for what we individually had. And so that was in alignment. And then I also think that once we started producing events in the industry, the company that we worked for had a lot of partner companies. And so the partner companies started coming to us and saying, why don't you guys plan the event and we'll just sponsor the event? We'll just pay whatever amount of money for you guys to plan the event and we'll pay for it. And so I think that's really where we started, like the light bulb went off. Like, oh, actually, not only are we doing this for our company, but other companies are coming to us asking us to plan their events as well because we plan amazing experiences. And so I think that's where that happened. So Let's talk about the spark behind Prospect Events. Let's go way back. Actually, Meredith has a very interesting career story that is extremely inspiring. So let's go back to your college days, Mer. Take us through that and how you got to where you are now.
Okay. Well, I studied fine art with an emphasis on photography. Went to school up in the Bay Area. I thought I was going to be an artist. Then I realized that's very competitive. I'm not the best artist. I might not make a living doing this. I graduated in the economic recession back in 2008, 2009. So I was working in fashion. I didn't like what I was doing. And I hadn't done study abroad because I had transferred too many times in college and lost too many credits. And my mom was like, hell no, you're not doing study abroad because you need to graduate because I'm not going to keep paying for more and more college. So long story short,
I mean, she wasn't wrong.
she wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong. My shout out to Suzanne Heller because she herself is a hustler who inspired me to work really hard. Single mother, worked really, really hard to even get me through college. But because of that, I hadn't done study abroad. I really, really had always wanted to do it. My sister went to Barcelona. And then when the economic recession happened, I was working in fashion, hated it. Then I went abroad to Thailand and taught English for like a year and a half because that I felt was my opportunity to do something abroad. So I came back. I would say I had done a lot of Southeast Asia. It was a great experience for me. Really opened up my mind. I hadn't been that well traveled before, but that's really what got me to love to travel. So I moved back to the Bay Area. I think this is 2012, and I didn't have a job. Economy had actually picked up a lot at that point. My sister was working in tech in recruiting, and she said, you should sign up at a temp agency and just see what jobs they have out there and just take those jobs, see if you like them, and then figure it out. So that's exactly what I did. I was getting data entry jobs, all these random jobs. And then I receive an email from the temp agency saying they need a front desk receptionist at this really cool startup. I said, let's do it. So I walk in, it was the day after New Year's, I'll remember. It was starting on January 2nd. And I was the front desk receptionist and I would make the coffee. I just really liked it actually because I was meeting and greeting every single person that came through. I would always know who's coming, who's going, if there's meetings. And then about 6 weeks into that job, it was supposed to end or they were going to extend if the person was good, just doing that role. But I was approached by the CEO. Shout out to Jim Payne, who's still a very good friend of mine. And he said, you're the only person that's lasted in this role because I guess they had gone through several different front desk people. And he said, I also happen to need an EA. Would you be open to doing that? I see that you're organized, you show up on time. So then I started to transition and I was his assistant. And then I was also managing the office in San Francisco. We had an office in New York and San Francisco. And through that experience, I really enjoyed working with the founder. I also enjoyed learning about how a company works, working across the different teams. And then from that, I had actually started to plan some events because the founder had wanted some events planned for them. And then I just started to move into that. And then I ended up moving into being an event coordinator under a woman by the name of Natalie Sandoval, who I still speak to as well.
Who's our client now?
Who's now a client. Shout out to Natalie. And long story short, our company then got acquired by Twitter, which is Twitter at the time, not X. And then I started doing events at Twitter. I was so thrilled. I remember thinking, how did I get this job? I'm so unqualified to be an events person at such a, that's when Twitter was also really hot. I woke up every day just so in awe of the fact that I had managed to pull this off. Honestly, I pulled something off. So that's how I started doing events.
Well deserved, I'm sure, though.
I worked hard for it, but still I had no experience, but I just really worked hard and I was eager to learn and I started to plan some amazing events for the company and traveling and putting together customer boards, doing events like Mobile World Congress. It was far beyond my dreams. I never had any events experience before I started doing this. And it's something I learned to really, really love. So that's how I got into events. It was super random. I had no background in it. Wasn't in a sorority. I know a lot of people have talked to me about it, that they planned events in their sorority, or I think that's a great way for anyone listening that is interested in events, if you've done something like that. But first off, I was the most disorganized person growing up, which is so opposite of what events are, which I think is funny. But I kind of learned I can really hyper focus on something I like, and I'll be organized within that. But yeah, that's how I ended up doing what I do.
That's cool.
Yeah, fell into it.
I love that story. All right. So, how did I get into doing events? So, I think I was one of five kids, or I am one of five kids. My mom was also always super creative. Growing up, I grew up on a farm, and my mom stayed at home and took care of the kids. And she was always like sewing us clothes, and we were always like wearing matching clothes because she would like buy fabric at like she would like save up and buy fabric at Walmart. And I remember like going into Walmart with her and getting fabric for like our Christmas clothes and things like that. And we would always be full, like five kids fully matching, and she would sew all of it by hand. Like she's so creative and amazing. And I think I got a little bit of that from her. She's very handy and just has like an eye and a knack for design and creativity. So I always really enjoyed that, but I never really had an outlet for that growing up. I made some of my own clothes and things like that. And I always enjoyed art, but I didn't really have a super creative outlet when I was growing up. However, then when I got into college, my dad was a lawyer, but before that, he was an engineer. So for some reason, I had it in my mind that I wanted to be an engineer, which I don't know where in the world I got that idea. I think I felt like when I was a freshman in college, I needed to make a decision on what I wanted to do. And so I tried that for a little while, and that was not the field for me at all. I was the only girl in all the classes. And then from there, I had a lot of math and science credit. So I was like, okay, I don't want to do this. So maybe I'll do pre pharmacy. So then I went into pre pharmacy and I got too many of those classes out of the way. And then I was like, I don't like any of this. So then I applied to business school at UGA and got in. And my parents were the same. I was the same. Like I hated college. Like I did not like it. Most people, college experience is like the best experience of their life. I would honestly look at college as like one of the hardest times in my life for sure. So I transferred to business and I transferred into marketing because I felt like I don't know why I was in very uncreative majors before, but I felt like my parents wouldn't let me go to art school or interior design or fashion or anything like that. They were always like typical Southern, you got to find a job that's going to make you money. Like you can't be a photographer or something. So I felt like going to business school was pretty much my only option to graduate. So I tried to go into the most creative major in the business school that I could, which was marketing. And I ended up really loving all the marketing classes. And so I knew that I wanted to do marketing in some shape or form. So I graduated from University of Georgia with a marketing degree. And probably my last 2 years of college, I had my eye on New York. Like it was, if I didn't get to New York, I would die. Like that was my mentality. And I ended up selling telephones in Atlanta, like actual hardware, like pick up the office phone telephone systems in Atlanta for 2 months. And I actually didn't do my job at all there. I sat at the computer all day long looking on Craigslist for internships in New York. That was what I did. I sat on the computer all day looking at ads on Craigslist for internships, and I applied to all of them. Like there was no chat GPT back then. There was no nothing. So I like would just sit at my desk and tailor my resume and apply to all these internships. And one of them actually called me and I had like 3 phone interviews with them and they gave me the job, which I literally thought I won the lottery. Like I cannot even tell you, it was $7.50 an hour, but it was a way for me to go to New York because I couldn't go to New York without having some sort of anchor there. So I got the internship. I went up to see an apartment in Brooklyn which I'd never been to Brooklyn in my life. I was like, where am I? But I was like, I don't care
Shout
if
out to Brooklyn.
I
I
was
love
like,
it.
I don't care if I die. I'm moving to New York. So, I mean, I even thought the graffiti was like scary. So that shows you what level I was at. I was living in Athens, Georgia. Like I was a little blonde, super blonde sorority girl. So I was supposed to move up to New York the day that Hurricane Sandy hit. And that got postponed. Also before I moved, I sold every single belonging that I owned, which was like all the furniture that my parents gave me for my college apartment, like their old furniture. And I also sold my car. So I had $4,000 and that was my savings from selling my car. I think I sold my car for like 3K and I sold all of my other belongings in a yard sale for 1K. So I moved up to New York on $4,000. My rent was $900 a month. And I ended up getting up after Hurricane Sandy. Like I got to the city and all the trees were down. There were no gas stations working. Like it was crazy. And I moved into my Brooklyn apartment with two men, two random men. Like I don't know where my dad still talks about like, what in the world were you thinking? Like this was crazy.
I lived with men before. It was fine. But
But
yeah.
they were totally they were like from Craigslist. Like I didn't
Yeah.
even know who they were.
Me too.
It was all good.
What
I
were we
mean,
doing? No, nowadays I think, yeah, but like what were we thinking?
I mean, I was like a little baby. I didn't know what I was doing. So anyway, from there, I ended up getting hired at ad agencies. So I worked doing social media marketing for a while at ad agencies before that was a thing, a big thing like it is now. There was no TikTok or anything. I just did like Facebook stuff. And then I ended up starting my own little social media marketing business when I was like 23. So I always knew that I wanted to be a business owner. And I did that for a little while until the company who we worked for when we met, they reached out to me and asked if I wanted to do their digital marketing. And I wasn't even looking for a job. So it was all just meant to be. What was a gap that we saw in the market? Because that definitely happened when we were working together at the company before we started our business, we always said, if we ever start our own business, we're going to solve this problem. And what was that problem?
Putting strategy in and not just making something look pretty, and also working within the marketing team of an organization when you're doing the events.
What sets us apart now and the gap that we saw in the industry was we work alongside the marketing team. Which a lot of production companies and agencies don't. There's so many incredible agencies out there that are way bigger than Prospect that have incredible builds and they really make events come to life. However, we had a marketing background, so we cared about the ROI when we were in-house. We cared about the attendee experience from a marketing perspective. And so we always vowed when we were little events babies that if we ever started our own business, we would implement that into the business. And I think that that is actually what we've done. And I think that's why our clients stay with us year over year over year.
So it's interesting because we were at an industry conference in Vegas called MAU, which we still do for several of our clients. And we had worked together at that point almost 3 years. And people would always say, you guys should start your own business. Like we'd be told that, not just from our old boss, but from other people. And so literally that event was, I think that year, it was the very first week of May. And we were like, we could do this ourselves. We could, not necessarily saying we want to produce that conference, but we were walking around the booths, I remember, and we said we could help our clients. We could help different clients produce their booth experience or their dinners or whatever it was. The kind of light bulb went off. And then we were talking about how we could start our business. There wasn't a specific timeline on it, but we're like, what do we need to get in track in order to do this? And then, shockingly, just to bring in something personal, 2 weeks later, my dad passed. So I was not in the right mental health space to even think about starting a business.
We were seriously talking about it.
Very seriously.
However, let's just note that we had absolutely no idea what went into that. We thought we knew and we were like, oh my God, we're just gonna like be making so much more than our salary. And and I will say it's a good thing that we didn't know because it started as a spark and an idea and it was something that we were good at, but we had no idea what was going to go into that. So we talked about it for a long time. And then unfortunately your dad passed, which I know was a very difficult time. And when that happened, I was like, before that, I was very excited about it. And then when that happened, I remember you telling me, I just need to get through the summer
Yeah.
and then we'll figure it
Yeah.
out. So we were talking about doing this for probably 6 months
Yeah.
before we actually did it.
Yeah. And then, of course, you never get over grief. My dad was still on my mind, don't get me wrong, 6 months later, but I was in a better headspace. And tech is volatile. Many industries are. We got laid off. So for anyone listening, it can be very daunting when you get laid off. I've actually been laid off twice. Sometimes the best things come from that experience. So of course we loved working with all the people internally. We missed them, but we looked at each other and we said, well, let's just try it. If it doesn't work, we'll go find jobs somewhere. That's okay. So that's actually what catapulted us into starting our own business was we didn't have jobs. And so we said, let's try this. But just to bring my dad back in, shout out to dad. He always said, you're creative. You'd be great working for yourself. So that actually ignited a spark in me too, to always do that. So I always kind of remembered his words to me. And he worked for himself and he didn't like authority. I don't love authority either.
So what I'll also say to your point about your dad is that your dad was an entrepreneur. I know.
And an artist. My dad was an artist.
An incredible artist.
He was an incredible visual artist, completely self-trained, kind of like a savant. And he always would instill trying new things. So even when I'm talking about this, I haven't thought that much about it, but how I ended up in something that I hadn't tried before, which is events. But that's kind of from my dad because he would always say, try new things and you'll see what you like
It's
and what you
also
don't.
brave.
Yeah.
It's
He
also
was
very
yeah,
brave.
he was brave.
And you are very creative. I would say, I mean, my parents, my dad was a lawyer, but he was also an entrepreneur. My parents owned their own business. And so he owns, eventually owned his own little Southern law practice, but it was like our whole life. And that's something that he's very proud of. And I was always very proud of my parents for doing what they could to make ends meet. They own rental properties. And also I had sort of like a mentor, like, growing up I think she was my main example of a female entrepreneur and business owner. And I think I saw through her that you could do it because I don't think I really knew any female entrepreneurs growing up. And so that was very instrumental for me to see in my teenage years and just her being so smart and successful. Um, so that was important. Shout out to Janet. Thanks for that. So anyway, I always like, because I had tried to start my own little
You had
business in
your
my
own
early
business.
20s, and it was always a dream for me. So anyway, the push came from external, and we were forced to do this. Even though you did give me a week to think about it. You're like, I'm going to start my own business. Yeah, we talked about it. If you want to come on board, take a week and think about it. I took a week and think about it, and I'm like, all right, what are we going to name it? But we can get into that another time. So yeah, so we started our business right before Thanksgiving of 2019. I think we were laid off at the end of October,
Yeah.
and then we started our business right before Thanksgiving of 2019, and we were like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Like, I thought I was so cool because I was a member of Soho House, and I was like, we're just gonna work from Soho House every day. But that was when Soho House was like the hot thing. And I remember being at Soho House eating dinner with, it was you and me and a few other people, and we were having like a meeting right in the early days of starting our business. We got through December and January. We got our logo through,
Upwork.
I think it was Fiverr.
Well, it was $100.
Fiverr is not
We paid someone
sponsoring
$100.
this podcast, but maybe one day. So yeah, we paid somebody $100 to create our logo, even though we did draw it on a napkin. Like, it kind of came from us, but they put it together. We didn't know how to use Canva back then. But Canva is also not sponsoring this podcast yet. So we got through December, and we actually closed some, like, shout out to David Spitz, our first client. We actually closed some real deals, like actually kind of big deals. And I was so excited.
Road shows, right? It was road shows and a few other the customer boards. There's
Yep.
2 customer boards.
Yep.
For another client.
Yep. We actually we were doing some cool stuff, and I was like really excited. We already had, I mean, I was like, oh my God, we're gonna have an income. Like, I was on unemployment. So I was really excited about that. we hadn't even really announced to our friends and made an official announcement on LinkedIn and stuff that we were going to start our business. And I was pushing to get the website done by the end. We got through the holidays, pushing to get the website done by the end of January. So we launched our business. And then I went on a trip to Bali.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was in Asia in February of 2020. And when I flew back on the plane from Asia, like everybody was wearing a mask. And I was like, this is so weird. This is bizarre. Why is everybody wearing a mask? And because I was like remote somewhere in Bali. And I got back and I was talking with somebody who used to live in Asia. And he was like, yeah, the sickness that is in Asia is already here. It's in New York and it's going to spread like wildfire and it's going to shut everything down. So I remember being at Soho House with you and saying the world is about to shut down. And I was thinking in my mind, what if this actually happens and this is one of the last social interactions and meals that we can have together? And like, what does this mean for our business and all of that? And then I think it was like a week later that everything shut down.
And I got the first batch of it too.
She did.
I got
She
the
sure
OG
did.
one.
She's an OG pandemic
Although
girl.
things weren't as bad for me. I know some people it was really bad for, but I was like, oh, great. Like this really is happening. I've got this.
Yeah. So it really happened. So we were both in New York and all of our contracts got canceled and we had to refund all of the money. So then we were like, shit. As Meredith said, what are we going to do now? And we truly did not know what we were going to do.
We're like, this is done.
Yeah, totally done.
And that maybe we'll go back in house, but who's going to be hiring events people when you can't do events? I remember thinking that.
We'll get more into how we actually built our business and grew our client base and thrived in the pandemic, eventually ended up thriving and built the foundation for what our business is today, which I think is a really amazing story that we're super proud of.
Actually, the pandemic was the best thing that ever had happened to us business-wise.
Truly. Let's talk about some early wins and early failures.
Well, I mean, the pandemic.
Yeah, that was an early failure for sure. So we had some, as we mentioned, we had some early wins. We signed some like to us back then, just starting out, actually very impressive, pretty big deals right out of the gate. It was really exciting. And then of course we lost all of that. And I mean, I was on unemployment. I was personally in debt, student debt. I mean, living in New York for a long time before that, like living on credit cards. It was tough times for me personally, for everybody, but financially very, very difficult for me. I mean, I had to give up my apartment. It was rough. I live with my sister.
And I think also it was challenging is that, that was 4 months after we started our business, right? And now we have to figure out how to get our clients out of these contracts with venues, not necessarily our contracts. We worked with them. Some were great and we allowed them to have a credit to use for virtual or for other things. However, navigating the pandemic from an events perspective was challenging across the board for all events people. I think that they can say the same. Like, it was never written that pandemics were considered an act of God because that we hadn't had a pandemic probably in 100 years at that point. It was, hurricanes, tornadoes, those types of things. So that was super interesting, actually. Now we know how to read contracts real well.
We're not lawyers, but
yeah, for non-lawyers, we know how to read them.
Yeah, that we cut our teeth on that for sure. I would say, like, when you say something's been a roller coaster, it was truly a roller coaster. Like, it was failure of getting laid off. I mean, I took that that job was my entire identity and it was an amazing job and it was very glamorous and traveling the world, and I was in my mid-20s partying, and that was when like the tech industry was spending so much money. So I was really sad to lose that part of my identity, and I had been laid off before, but I took that as a blow. And then we had like the uptick of us starting the company and the excitement and closing, some deals, which we actually I was very proud of through our network, but we really didn't have to work that hard to close a deal. And they just kind of came to us. So that was a very early win.
Yeah.
And then the downward spiral of losing all of that and going through the pandemic. When virtual events weren't even a thing, there were no virtual conferencing platforms. There was only Zoom, and I think I had only used Zoom like a handful of times ever.
Well, let's dig into that because that's actually really interesting. So, not only did we not have work at the time, I mean, I don't think we worked for a solid 5 months, like, physically with the client. However, I remember I took a call with one of my mentors and inspirations in the space, which is Janae, who's actually going to be on this podcast.
Woo woo.
We're very excited to have her, but she's been a real leader in this space for a long time. And she actually had just left her job, so she wasn't working. And she'll probably talk about that on the podcast. And I said, can you just give me an advisor call? I wasn't even thinking about virtual events. I was just like, I don't even know what to do. Yeah, we didn't. No
Was
one
like
knew
we
what
have
virtual
everybody
events were.
now
This was
knows
March 2020.
what a virtual event was, but like that wasn't a thing. Like that did not exist. So
So she said, so she's like, of course I'll take a call with you. So she hopped on a Zoom with me and Jess. It was like during deep quarantine
by the
too.
way, we would hop on calls in Zoom.
Yes.
You and I,
We tried
we
everything
would
every day.
sit. I remember sitting at a folding. I was like staying at somebody's apartment because I had to give up my apartment. And I was also terrified to be in New York City alone during that time. And I was sitting at a card table every day, and we would sit on our computer every day and think about who
Yeah.
can we reach out to? How can we figure out how to make money? Like, even I don't care if we even make $100. Like, how can we?
We were making $100. That's what.
I mean, I was making zero back then.
No, but once we started. So anyway, she advised us and she said, I'm hearing about these virtual events, like people are trying to scramble. If you're there, I remember she phrased it exactly like this and it stuck in my mind. If you're there for the clients during the hard times and figuring out how to do things for your clients that's creative when they can't do events, they're going to want to work with you when the times get better. And that stuck in my mind. And so we were like, all right, we made a deck, I remember, about experiences.
We made it all up.
We made it all up. We were like, we can do virtual cooking classes. We can do virtual magicians. We can do all of this stuff. We'd never done it before. Actually, my dear friend who is in this house right now is our first client.
Go, Caitlin.
Caitlin at Twitter. We actually had a few different but she was the first one. And then we had a cooking class right after. And we should go into that quickly about what she did for that cooking class. But we launched with a virtual cocktail class. Our profit on that was $150 because I overshot how much the shipping was going to be. But that's on me. I couldn't overcharge the client for it.
But you would have thought we made $1 million.
But we made kits for everyone. We shipped everyone these beautiful cocktail making kits with the alcohol, and we had an amazing bartender who came from the Dead Rabbit, which has been rated the best bar in the world several times. Greg Buda, if you're listening. And he posted this from, I think it was actually Google Hangouts because you guys couldn't use Zoom at Twitter. And that was the first one. We kind of got the momentum going.
We
were
practiced with him.
Yeah, we took it so seriously. We did like practices, camera angles. Like our life depended on this. And then we had a client approach us about doing a cooking class, and we lied to them and said we did tons of these.
We didn't lie. It's called fake it till you make it. Okay.
All right. Well, we said that we had experience. They came to us saying it was a client that we had that was supposed to do in person with, but obviously we weren't doing in person, and said, we need to engage our customers. Events have been such a great lead source. However, we don't even know what to do. Could we do at-home cooking classes? And so then the client wanted to do like Southern comfort foods.
With a Southern chef.
Yeah, specifically with the Southern chef. And so Jess was actually living at home in Georgia at the time.
Because I don't think even my friends know how dire my financial issues were, but I had no money. So I had no apartment. I had to put all my stuff in storage. I was living with my sister in Georgia. And when this event came through in Atlanta, I was like, this is so lucky because I'm here.
Yeah. So they actually picked a chef from the South or from Atlanta where she was living. It wasn't even purposeful. I think we had some from Nashville, other places. But we couldn't figure out the shipping. The restaurants didn't do this either at the time. They ended up learning during the pandemic, but they didn't know how to ship food, like kits to people. So
restaurants were also suffering big time. The whole hospitality and service industry, which I think we really do fall under hospitality in a lot of ways, but we were all obviously struggling. Like nobody could even go into a restaurant back then, right? So what happened is I was living with my sister. I had no money, as I mentioned. It's like a pivotal moment for me. If you can't tell, it's hard times. So I was living with my sister in Athens, Georgia. Go Dogs. My best friend Brooke was living in Atlanta. She was Airbnb-ing an apartment in Atlanta, and she had a very steady, stable, great job. And she was like, "Why don't you come to Atlanta and stay with me?" Because I was like, how many more times can I like go to the pool every day and try to figure out how to make money at my sister's house? So I went to stay with her in Atlanta. And that also coincided with this cooking class. So it just shows you how universe, God, all the things, like they fall together and they work cohesively when things are meant to be. So what I did, I said, Meredith, if we can close this deal and you can figure out the Zoom side of things, I will figure out the food and logistics. So what we did is I emailed all these restaurants in Atlanta with the ones with famous Southern chefs, like cold outreach. Nobody knew what any of this was. And one of them got back to me. And I said, if you can make meal kits, if you can make ingredient kits, I'll take care of the rest and we'll teach the celebrity chef how to go on Zoom and inform people on how to cook these dishes. So that's what we did. So I went to stay with my friend Brooke, and she still talks about this to this day. Like, she's so cute. She still cries when she talks about it. And actually, that same day that we launched this cooking class, a well-meaning family member told me it was time for me to get a job at Starbucks, which I love Starbucks. But I remember telling them, I love you. You shall not be named. But I remember telling them that if this cooking class doesn't work, then I will go get a job at Starbucks. That's what I will do. I promise. So we worked with the restaurant, and I went and I rented a minivan at the Atlanta Hartsfield Airport. Okay. It's just me and Meredith. We have no team. We
Wait,
have no nothing.
you're missing a huge part.
What part?
I'm not from Atlanta. I've honestly never been, but it's very spread out. So we told the client in planning, they have to be local to Atlanta because we can't ship the ingredients. And there were about 15 to 20 people on this.
Local.
But it's like I live in Los Angeles, which is if I had 20 deliveries in LA, it would take me 12 hours.
Okay.
So just like, oh, I got it.
I was like, I'll figure it out, which like I think that's still
You woke up at like 6 a.m.
That's still our mentality now. I'll
No, it
figure it
is.
out.
But you
So I
started
woke
at
up
6 a.m., I think.
because we couldn't pay for the car rental. And the clients we did this for, I don't think you know that we did this. So Leah Hansen, if you're listening to this, this is how we pulled this off and made this happen. And you continued to be our client for a very, very long time after that. And so I got up. I think I got up at 4.
But you like started the deliveries at 6 because we tell the client what time, the customer of theirs, what time their delivery was. So it ranged anywhere from 6 a.m. to like honestly 5:30 right before the class.
So because we couldn't pay for a car rental for 2 days because we wouldn't make any money on that.
The margins.
So I told Meredith, because she said, you can get delivery. We can talk to a delivery person and do this. And I said, I'll deliver it. And you said, if you deliver it, then you can take that portion of the profit.
Right. Because what we did was we calculated how much the courier would be because we got a quote. And then I said, well, I think it was $800 or something.
$800.
Yeah. And I said, if you need the money and you feel comfortable doing it, then by all means, you do it. And she got the money from the deliveries.
Yeah. And so that was like the motivating factor from that as well. So I got up at 4 a.m. I went to the Atlanta airport, which is like anywhere that you are in Atlanta. The Atlanta airport's like at least an hour. Like it's so far. So I went to the Atlanta airport. I rented a minivan, and I still have like pictures of this and videos. I rented a minivan. Then I went to Kroger and I got, I think we had like 20. It was like
you had to get the
deliveries.
freezer pack.
I went and I got the styrofoam coolers and I put a bag of ice in each of them. So I got like 17 bags of ice. The people at Kroger, I mean, it's the middle, like the thick of the pandemic. They're like, who is this crazy person? So thank God they had enough coolers. I just like winged it. Like, we didn't know if it was going to work out or not. So the night before, there was no Chat GPT. There was no nothing. So I put in I figured out the route the night before on Google Maps. Like I put in each person's address and how I logistically figured out how I was going to deliver this all around Atlanta.
And then meanwhile, I'm sitting not helping at all in New York. What I would do though is she would text me, okay, I'm almost at this person's, because we had sent emails, and then I would be like, your
She
your
was like
food's on
the communicator.
yeah. So I'd be like, your because they had to refrigerate the stuff. It couldn't be sitting on the stoop. So you would send a picture and I'd send the email. It was very logistics heavy.
You were the messenger. So I loaded it all up. Then I went to the restaurant, and the restaurant had prepared the meal kits. I took each little ingredient packet that he had made, put it on ice in the cooler, and, like, I remember the people working at the restaurant were like, "Who is this like, this minivan was filled to the brim with coolers. I don't know if I had had to put another cooler in the minivan, it wouldn't have fit. And I started my route, and I delivered. So the cooking class, I think, started at 7 p.m. that night, and from 9 in the morning until I think I dropped off the last delivery right before 6 p.m., because I had to get back so I could be on for the cooking class itself. We got a little branded apron,
Super cute.
and this was a no contact time. So I had a mask on when I was delivering. I had gloves on, and I hand delivered every single ingredient pack, and I personally made $800 for that event, and that was, like, the most money that I had had in a very long time.
I think I made, like, then the actual profit of the event, because, we were learning our margins at the time. And I think we made like $300 on it. So I got 150 myself, and you got an extra 150, but we were,
That was
but
great.
it was more not about the money. We figured out we could pull this off. And so then what we did was we started to pitch
Client
restaurants.
was happy. It went really well.
It was actually extremely smooth.
It ended with fresh baked cookie dough, like, you put the cookies into the and wine tasting, the whole thing.
And then, to your point, the restaurant industry and the bar industry was struggling a lot. So we started to just shoot emails to all these restaurants that we knew and adored in New York or other cities, and said, would you be interested in doing cooking class? So actually, we launched some people's virtual cooking programs that they ended up doing with other companies.
It ended up consulting with a lot of restaurants. I mean, a few of them, State Bird in San Francisco. What was the one in New York? Blue Hill?
Yeah, Blue Hill Stone Barns.
Amongst many others.
And then they got the gist of it too. They were these beautiful cooking classes. Honestly, like, I would sit in on these. We did this for months. And
So we also learned how to ship food.
yes.
So that was how we started our whole business.
Which, if we want to talk about some fails, because you can't control shipping sometimes. So even if you do an overnight ship, and during the pandemic, remember, everyone was ordering everything online. Some people wouldn't get their box in time. So we'd have to send a sorry email, but we tried the best that we could. It was few and far between, all things considered, but there was very stressful, because we'd be tracking these remember how many tracking numbers we'd have? Because we would then, at one point, we would have like 2 virtual events a night. It'd be like, Jess is managing the flower making class while I'm doing the bartending class. Like, it really picked up. I would say in the fall of that year, we started to really pick up, and we were doing like multiple a week.
We got to where we made $1,000 on each one of those classes. And that was
good. Yeah. Like, we had one week, I think we made like 5 or 6K off of these classes. And we're like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah. And, like, it's a brand new business.
The cool thing is, because we have a marketing background, this kind of ties into how we started our business. Some of them were internal events, but most of them were them trying to engage their customers for leads and stuff. They would get a lot of those at trade shows and events. So this was actually very important to them. So we would ideate on the types of events that would be good for them. And they said that these types of events got them through their sales funnels and stuff, because they didn't realize how impactful events and meeting people in person was. We have swag down to a T. Like, we do a lot of branding. We would make these beautiful kits for the bartending classes, put the logos of the clients, but our amazing fulfillment partner, her husband built her shelves in their garage with all of our stock
Just
kits.
for prospect.
Just for prospect, because she also didn't have as much business at the time, because people weren't ordering new hire swag and stuff, because stuff was on hold. So it was a special time, actually, because
Yeah. It was. And that was, like, the beginning of everything. Like, my sister, who now has started her own successful business, which has been, like, such a fun journey to help her on and to watch her grow, always says she was inspired by us, because I was living in her basement and for almost a year, and I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And she says, I remember you sitting down there from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. working. I would get cramps in my legs. I now have back problems from sitting for so long.
we ended up just not doing virtual experiences. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, you have to really get that like creativity bug going. And anything that someone would ask, we would say we could do it, even though we had never done it before. We were open to trying. And so the other things that we really ended up doing well were the
I
conferences.
was just about to say we started doing virtual conferences, and some of those very first clients that trusted us with their virtual conferences on Zoom that we put together um, are still our clients. And that was before there were any virtual conferencing platforms and Bizibo and all these things that, which Bizibo does not sponsor this podcast, but one day they will. All of those clients and partners really came together and they supported us and helped us through this time as well.
And I think what was interesting is a lot of clients would look to us for advise them, and we never knew at that point, a year in after the pandemic, we couldn't figure out if we thought the pandemic was going to last forever, right? When you're in it, you felt it. I'm sure, in no matter what, in any industry or whatnot. And I remember they'd be like, when should we start planning in person? And we're like, honestly, we don't want to even do that, because we're going to think in our minds, we're going to end up having to do more work, canceling things. So we just said, let's just continue with the virtual conferences. Let's continue with the virtual experiences. And so that was cool too, to be able to be like a thought leader and an advisor. We were on different speaking engagements, virtual conferences in the industry, speakers. It was really cool. And then, of course, I would say things started to pick up in like 2022, early 2022. That's when we started to kind of weed off the solely doing the virtual events. But then we were doing, Amazon AWS was the first big conference that came back in the industry that did in person. It was fully masked. We did a booth for the client that we did all of those cooking classes. To say there were trials and tribulations is an understatement.
Some things we didn't know when we started. We did not know how to close a deal. We didn't know how to negotiate.
Our pricing model was all over the place too.
We didn't know how to build a team or have a team. Yeah, we didn't know how to price things. We didn't know how to read a contract. We didn't know how to create a contract.
We didn't know anything.
We didn't know how to do accounting or bookkeeping, which
we were completely incompetent.
I don't think I did very well in my college finance classes, but now I do all of our finances. So you never know what's going to happen.
Ask my mother. I haven't taken math since I was 17 years old. She
I thought you
actually
were gonna
had
say
to
since
ask.
7th grade.
No, she actually, basically, that's probably the last time I understood a number. But yeah.
Which is why I do all of our finances. But that gets to our next question of what are our strengths and let's not say weaknesses, but what are our sparkling water is my weakness. But what are our strengths? I would say one of Meredith's biggest strengths that has carried our business forward in good times and bad is her ability to stay connected with people. So that is, I think, your shining skill that has carried our business forward.
Yeah. I think something interesting is I really enjoy, I'm a people person, but I enjoy keeping in contact with people. It's always been something, maybe because I've moved around. And nothing was ever intentional, but I think I'm really good at that. And so that actually has been extremely invaluable for our business, because most of our clients have been either people that Jessica and I had worked with previously, or some people were people that she knew and learned. But I will say, like, I'll give myself a little credit that a lot of the clients that we brought in were people that I had known from the industry or had referred us to other people in the industry.
Yeah, that certainly got us through that tough time. So you can toot your own horn on that. Absolutely.
Jess is amazing. She's amazing with numbers.
Who knew?
Very, very detail oriented, very operational. I can't say enough good things about working with her. I think we both have our different skill sets. Some definitely overlap. Like, we both know how to plan events. We know how to plan events, so you can step in on that stuff, even though we have a wonderful team that works for us that, crushes it, and we don't always have to do everything, which is great. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we've had to just learn on the fly, though, because
you just get through it.
You just get through it and you learn, and then it becomes easier over time.
I think our business and what we've learned was born out of desperation, which it sounds negative, but I actually think that that's like the best way for things to happen, because you don't have anything to lose.
Yeah. And I think we always joke that we were a little big for our britches when we first started. We thought, because we were getting some contracts right away. We're like, oh, it's going to be so easy. And I'm actually so happy that not that the pandemic happened for health reasons and it's terrible for people, but that something, a catastrophic thing happened for our business. It's more about that, not about the pandemic, because I don't want to be insensitive. But
We had to start from scratch.
we had to start and we had to get real scrappy, and it really kicked us down. And we learned never to let your ego get in the way.
And now when we don't close a deal or when something, knock on wood, I mean, I think we work our asses off, but we've been pretty fortunate. But now when negative things happen in the business, we always look at each other and we say, you know what? We got through the pandemic.
Literally. And we don't dwell upon it. We move forward. Don't let it get us down. Because if you can survive that, if you can survive the pandemic doing an events business or anyone in like something where you literally have to meet people in person, the worst business to have is anything in that, hospitality for this particular catastrophe is what I'm saying. There's many different types of catastrophes that happen to others. Then we could survive that. We could survive anything. So we certainly don't win every deal. We certainly have things that happen. Things go wrong. As you know, events are live. Things go wrong on the ground, but it's helped us to have a thicker skin to get through it and then proceed and move forward and not get super upset, honestly.
Yeah. Agreed. How has our friendship evolved with the business? That's for a whole other episode. I mean, that's for a whole episode in and of itself. I think we should talk about what it likes to have a business partnership and be business partners and work together every day. I mean, I would say, as mentioned, Meredith and I started off, I mean, she was my boss. And I saw her, I don't think I really saw her as a friend when we were working internally together because she was my boss. I think there's like a certain, relationship that you have to have there. However, we've been through some shit together now, business and otherwise. But what I will say is that we still work really well together, which was the foundation that we had in the beginning, where we operationally, we are just a tag team of it's done. Okay, I'll do this. You do that. Just working very seamlessly together, logistically, operationally, creatively. And so that is the foundation of our business. And so we still have that. I think when you run a business with somebody, I feel like it's almost closer than a marriage because you're talking to that person all day long, pretty much every day. At least that's what we do to run our business. You share a bank account, you share liability, you share a team, you share a reputation too. A lot of people ask, are you and Meredith like best friends, like besties? And it's like, we're friends in a very different way. We're friends like family. We're friends like you're friends with your sister. And I think we operate like sisters. I would say 99% of the time we get along swimmingly. But when you work together every day,
Yeah.
there's an ebb and flow for sure.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is our dynamic or just how we started. There's many people that go into business with a different background. Family members go into business, friends go into business. But we started the core foundation of how we started our business is we started out, we didn't know each other before, and we were strangers, and we learned that we worked really well together. So when we started our business, you can take a risk. Even my sister, who I'm extremely close with, I've never had a business with her. I've never worked with her. So I don't know how that would even go. I'm just thinking of that as an example. But I already knew that I knew how to work really well with her. I have the same work ethic.
I love my friends and family members, but now after running a business with a business partner, I probably wouldn't start a business with anybody else. I mean, it's pretty intense. So, we're doing great. We're doing great. Personally, professionally, we're doing great. All right. So let's talk about what's coming on this season of the Eventful Podcast.
We have a wide range of guests, as Jess mentioned in the intro. They're all female this season. We really want to focus on that because that's a really important part of our business. Although we do love working with all genders, being a female-founded business has been a huge part of us, right? So we decided to launch the first season with all females, anyone ranging from a business owner themselves to maybe someone that's working internally at a company.
We have, just to name a few, which this is including but not limited to, Sophie Ratner, who is a female founder that owns her own thriving jewelry business, which we think is really interesting. Obviously, we have, a business that that works very closely with marketing, and it has a lot to do with marketing. And a lot of our clients are in tech and private equity, but we really wanted to kind of explore outside of the realms that people are used to seeing us in, because we are connected to and inspired by so many incredible women leaders and founders. We also have a executive coach, which is very exciting. Meredith and I love working with coaches, and we've worked with a lot of coaches over the years that have been very helpful, both individually and together. So we're very excited to have her on. We have a female leader coming in to speak with us from a luxury travel agency, who honestly has the coolest job ever. And she's actually one of our clients who we're so inspired by and can't wait to chat with her.
Someone else that's super inspiring to myself and Jess has met is an OG female entrepreneur and business owner, Joan Landorf, who I have literally known since I was 9 months old. She's now retired, but it's never too late to start something new. She's also doing executive coaching too. But she had her own businesses for 40 years, I would say. So she'll be speaking. We have a therapist who works with women and has a very large social media following. I think that'll be super interesting. And how she has two sides to her business. One, she's just a private therapist, but also used her social media for the last, I think, at least half a decade to inspire women about mental health.
So we're really excited. We want every episode to feel like the person listening, you as the listener, are part of, like, if you pulled up a seat at a conversation with these incredible women and just guests in future seasons, and just on the solo episodes with myself and Meredith, we want you to just feel like you're here with us in the room. And I think it'll be all extremely interesting conversations that, have that weave a thread through sort of corporate life, inspiration, leadership, maybe running and owning a business, and or what it takes to be a founder, a leader, and then also just inspiring stuff.
And we're hoping that people can learn things too. I mean, I love listening to podcasts. I think Jess likes podcasts as well, and I've learned a lot from them. So hopefully someone can, if anything, you're going to hear an interesting story, but there might be some things that you learn from this that you can bring into your own business, or if you don't have a business, just how you want to be as a leader in whatever industry you're in. So,
And let's just say, every episode we may spill a little tea.
yeah,
Just a little. Just a little.
I mean, we want to make it fun, and we love a little tea, aka gossip. We'll give you guys some intel.
We're legally allowed to share. We shall.